Hello, and thank you for joining me on another episode of the Finish More Music podcast. And I am delighted to be joined by a producer who I work very closely with. He's not just incredibly skillful as a producer and very, very versatile. He can turn his hand at anything. He is also one of the nicest guys I've ever had the pleasure to work with. Mr. Mark Allin, aka Riigs, how are you, buddy?
I'm great, Keith. Thanks very much. I'm good. What a nice intro. What a nice intro.
I know. I can't say all the bad bits about you at the start. I'll leave that to the outro when we
haven't got enough
time. Dear, oh dear. Well, first of all, thanks very much for jumping on. I really appreciate it. You've had a really kind of explosive year. I think before we get into that, what's happening in your world at the moment in the world of music for you?
So right now, I'm at a point where and we can get into this, where my productivity is kind of at an all-time high. So I'm laser focused on finishing a track a week if I can, if not more, with some very specific goals around what I want to do with them, what genre they are, where I'd like them to go, and so on. So I'm feeling, for the first time ever, really musically, I have a real plan for what I want to do, and that's just incredibly empowering and very, very motivating. So that's good. I'm working on probably 3 collaborations simultaneously at various different stages with fellow FMM members and good mates, and those are also just very, very rewarding, both as a way to learn and as a way to kind of grow as a producer and get some great tunes out as well. And I've just started on the whole process of releasing. So I've signed about a dozen contracts in the last month or 6 weeks. And then these will all be coming out, some collabs and some on my own, and they're all going to come out over the next 3-4 months. So I've started to gear up my socials and so on. And I can talk a bit about my approach to releasing at some point, because I have a few thoughts on it, but that's where I am.
So basically, all systems go by the sounds of things.
All systems go. Yeah, I mean the thing about releasing and where I am in my journey. So we'll talk about the year that I've had, but obviously I'm still standing in the foothills, looking up at the mountain. There's a long way to go, but I've made myself think about releases the same way I used to think about financial success when I was in business, which is financial success is the outcome of doing things well. It's not the purpose on its own. And for me, kind of releases are the same at the moment. If I get something accepted by a label and released, that's the end of a process which I think I've done as well as I can. But I don't set out to write music for it to be released. I might do at some point in the future, but I see it now as not only a great experience, but also a way of just marking progress for myself, and kind of interacting with people and getting more music out. But I'm not slavishly following it, if that makes sense.
Totally. And it's very kind of interesting, because even if you get to a point where you decide, okay, I want to write X track to get released somewhere, that's still the end that isn't in your control, and to focus on it is to create anxiety and challenges and things that stifle and really crush creativity. Even with the goal at the end, it will still come back to exactly what you're doing now, which is talking about the processes that you follow in the studio, the way you turn up, the way you show up every day, the processes, the motions you go through to write music will be the same. It may be that you've done a little bit of different preparation before you go into the process to try and get to the result, but it will still be what you're doing now. The sort of conveyor belt, I guess, is a nice way of putting it, that you've created. The system is the one that will continue to grow and develop, and you get faster and hone your skills all the way through to, when you're releasing. I don't know, where are we going? Where are you going to be releasing them?
Where, into which labels, or?
Yeah, do we know? Because I know I mentioned at the top that you're really versatile, and that is one of the incredible things that I find. I mean, what, disco house, minimal house, progressive house. I don't know what
Yes.
you've been doing with Jeffrey lately, but it's
Yeah.
not just a case of, oh, you can make a bit of that. All of those tracks that you've been involved in are really good. I mean, obviously you had Nick Muir supporting one of them. So this is,
Right.
you know, these
Yeah,
are
no,
not
it's
any old output. They're great.
well, thank you. And yeah, I mean, I'm pleased. So at the moment, so I've got six tracks coming out with a label called Boss House Records in London, and one a collaboration with our friend Juris with O Records in Stockholm, which is a really good label. I think we're certainly excited about that. And then Deep People Records and a couple in label affiliation, which has been a great thing through FMM. And those, I guess they sort of reflect the journey. There's probably more house. There's a couple of piano house tracks and minimal and funky house tracks in those. And I've spent quite a lot of the year in that genre. Obviously deep house with Juris, and then some stuff that I think, well, I know will be coming out as a case of just firming up the details, which is more in the sort of melodic house, progressive house area. And I'm actually, this kind of jumping around genres, I'm totally fine with at the moment. I might lock down at some point and say, you know, based perhaps on where I'm getting the most satisfaction or where I think I'm progressing most as an artist, I might lock into a genre. But I am naturally curious, and I've let that just run through the year. And I'm curious about how music is made. You know, so as you said, the track that Nick Muir supported, which was a progressive house track, and then Andreas, my partner, and I went on to write 4 more, which are out at the moment with labels. You know, that is a genre I loved listening to since the 90s, but I'd never really made it. And I thought, what goes on under the hood here? So, and that was a specific learning. Listen, figure out the elements, think about what emotionally moves you in that music or in house or disco, whatever it is, and then get to work. Don't copy it. You know, I don't want to copy anything, but just think about, and I think this is a big part of listening effectively, is not so much technically what is going on in that Sasha track, but why does it make the hairs stand up on the back of my neck? And that may be just simply the way that a sustained bass is just filtered in and out over the track, and that's it. Everything else is then supporting that. You go, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. You know, I'm going to focus on that. So a big part of the last year is about learning, and that's been always the number one goal for the year. How much can I learn that I didn't know? How can I put that into practice? Yeah, we've hit a few walls on the way, and we can get into that. But yeah, this genre jumping, which you know, in some ways of looking at a career or your progress as a producer may not be classic, as in you really need to pick a genre and go for it. And I probably will at some point, but right now it kind of just suits my creative temperament and curiosity to be bouncing around a bit, even though sometimes it confuses me. I can't remember which genre I'm supposed to be in.
Well, I mean, I love that, because curiosity is kind of one of the keys to unlocking your creativity, and also talking about learning as well, that they're motivators that are about you and why you love following the process that is then automatically getting the results. So it's really cool that you're talking about these things, because they're all the very building blocks of how you go about being successful as a creative. Now, another thing that I've picked up on, and maybe this is perhaps a good time to compare and contrast a little bit with the beginning of the year and talk about your journey. But even then, when you were talking about what you're doing and the plan that you've now got, you know, that you feel really confident in, is you're brimming with belief about where you can go and what you can do and what you can achieve. So, and in fact, just before we started, it was great, because I said to you, oh, you know, I really want to play one of your tunes at the end. What's that going to be? And you said, oh, it's this one. I said, oh, is that released? He said, no, but it will be. Like, now that, when we first started working together, wouldn't have been the way that you talked about music at all. So that's like amazing to hear that. But I guess as a start of a compare and contrast to where you are now and where you were, How has the sort of belief and the mindset changed? Where were you sort of 12 months ago compared to where you are now?
So 12, I mean, I got back into music, just give you a little bit of context. I got back into music production seriously about 18 months ago. I've been a musician all my life and created music. I've been in bands. I was an early Cubase user and sampler user in the 90s, like everybody else. And then I put it all aside because I was focused on family and my career and traveling the world. So I've lived in just about every continent following my career. And in 2017, I decided to put my corporate career, in inverted commas, on permanent hold and to do some different things. You know, it's I'm certainly not young anymore, and there's things I wanted to get done, and one of them was music, and certainly for the encouragement of my family and particularly my wife, is kind of, you really need to spend time on this. It's been such an important part of your life. So, you know, I bought Ableton Live and I got back into it and started to write and produce, and I sort of got nowhere really. And it wasn't just about being stuck in the 8-bar loop. It was partly that. It was, I didn't have any direction. And I was so used to having goals, but I didn't have any. So I kind of meandered around for 3 or 4 months. I was having fun. I enjoyed what I was doing, but I made a conscious decision to commit to music, not with a goal that said you have to have done X by time Y. I don't think that's helpful, because if you fall short, then what? You just give up. But have a goal which was essentially to spend more time on it, and to spend more time in a way that was structured, and to learn a lot. So I started off kind of, this is probably last summer, just beginning to, partly through YouTube tutorials and reading and so on, just started to put together a plan for what I wanted to do, both the technical skills I wanted, but it still wasn't quite going anywhere until I discovered Finish More Music. And both, not before I joined though, actually, it was the 6-part video series, track start to finish, that you did.
Yeah, Make a Track Fast.
Yeah, Make a Track Fast. That was the breakthrough. And I didn't even know there was a community. So I watched that probably 10 times and just used the discipline to start creating more quickly. Eventually I joined the community, but I didn't actually become active until the beginning of this year. So I was traveling a lot and doing other things. So I was lurking a bit for a while. So the difference through that period, after I'd first started to understand the system and then into this year, was bringing some discipline and goals and purpose to every session. So I started just to break down what I was trying to get done. So initially it was write a track in a month, and here's how I'm going to do it day by day. It didn't always work, but here's how I'm going to think about generating the ideas. Here's how I'm going to start to develop a theme, even though I didn't use those terms quite then. And I know what I'm going to go into the studio and do. And I've actually stuck with that. It's probably been one of the biggest drivers of being able to up my productivity is now, every time I go into the studio, I know what I'm going to do. There might be 3 things to a track or a collab or whatever. And I decided the night before, when I finished the last session, what they were. So just in writing a journal, which I do, it's kind of, and tomorrow I'm going to focus on these 3 things. And I started doing that well over a year ago. And if there's one thing that made a difference in those early months, it was that. And suddenly it's just the law of compounding. If you do what you said you were going to do on that day, every day for a week, and multiply that by a month, you will overachieve, just in terms of productivity and output. And that's been huge. So once I joined FMM and became active in the community, then all of that learning, all of the content and the support from other members kind of reinforce that approach. So yeah, I think the first point has been about being structured in the way that I learn, structured in the way that I produce, and being clear with myself about what I want to do every day. Sometimes what I want to do every day is muck about, and I'll say so. Today you're going to play. You're going to create some ideas. You're going to, maybe if I'm naughty, you're going to play with a new plugin. I try not to do that, but sometimes, you're going to have fun, but otherwise here are the things we're going to get done. So I just sort of carried that over from my previous professional life, where I would never start a day without some idea of what I was going to do. Otherwise I'd have been in a mess.
It's interesting you mentioned carrying it over from your professional life, because the goal setting structure that we use in FMM and using the one-to-ones with you, that is heavily borrowed from my corporate career as well, the structure of achievement. And it's really interesting because one of the biggest myths and lies about creativity is that structure kills it. Is that, if you put it in a box, that's it, I'm going to crush it, I won't be able to create. But actually the reverse is true. As you well know, creativity thrives in constraints, whether they're constraints of time, of software, of equipment, of the challenge that you've set yourself. When we create a box, all of a sudden we've got the rules of a game in which we can improvise. Without that, there are no rules. I mean, imagine a game of football just on a limitless pitch with thousands of goals everywhere and players on hundreds of different teams. It's aimless. It kind of goes nowhere. So it's having the game within which to improvise that allows us to flourish, which I think is a really important point for people to pick up. Versus, though, and it's a fine balance in that if we don't have the rules, the creativity doesn't thrive. And if we go too narrow, so I talk about people following walkthroughs and stuff, and they're great if you want to learn a list of technical skills and maybe get some inspiration, certainly not slamming anyone who's following how someone else makes a track. But if you say, well, I'm going to do what they're going to do, a little bit like you talked about just now in terms of, analyzing different genres and things, all of a sudden you're not creating, you're copying. And then go on, please.
No, exactly, Keith, exactly. I think, one of the other important things in that process, as you're describing it, is the importance of having a system and to set your goals weekly, daily, whatever you do, but also to suspend judgment about the output. Because I think when you're starting out as a producer or a creative, you think about the end product. So everybody wants to have written a novel, but nobody wants to write one because it's so difficult. So everybody wants to have written a burial track, something incredibly sophisticated, but it's a lot. So it was important to me to just take that away. It doesn't matter what it is at the other end. It needs to get done. And then we can think about, is it right or wrong? So, but you're right. I mean, creativity, I think, is showing up multiplied by suspending judgment. And if you do those things, then you get into a creative flow. And that is a mystical state. I mean, that isn't about process. That's about your subconscious taking over and saying, thank you very much for all these tools and discipline that you've given me. Now I'm going to do something that you didn't know you could do. And something will exist at the end of this session in the world that didn't exist before. And that is remarkable. That is remarkable. So I wouldn't for a minute say, that creativity itself is only structure, but it is a function of structure. And for me anyway, structure and suspending judgment.
Basically, you follow a creative process. A creative process, the actual definition of it is a series or a sequence, of thoughts and actions that lead to an original production. Yeah. That's what a process is. And so it's all the things that go on around it, getting into the right headspace, because there's also one other ingredient that I'll sort of chuck into your equation, if you allow me, is that there's the multiplying of you being in creative flow and suspending judgment and so on. But there's also the knowing when you're going to finish it and having the discipline to get it done. Because there is a time where, you know, for example, when you're doing the mix down and you're going to swap out a kick drum, now is not the time to start trying new kick patterns and percussion patterns and stuff like that, because you go back down the rabbit hole, and as most of us know, you kind of make what you were doing worse along the process. So there's kind of that one extra jigsaw piece on the internal state front. So one of the things you've talked to as well before is the idea of how you think about yourself as a music producer. So again, I think it would be great to get the contrast of where you were and where you are now on that front, please.
Yeah, no, and this is actually, I mean, that's such a good segue, because it actually relates to what you just said about finishing music. So a year ago, 18 months ago, there I am, producing music, sitting down before I've really got structure and process, and nothing gets finished. And so, you know, so I went to, I think it's about 18 months ago, maybe 2 years now, it must have been 18 months, to a music conference. It was a Novation sponsored thing and lots of producers there. And you're chatting over lunch with people, and everyone says, oh, let's swap SoundClouds. And I'm thinking, uh-oh. So everyone's swapping SoundClouds, and they've got tracks and, you know, stuff. And that was great. You know, it was good to be in that community. So there I am apologizing. Well, here's my SoundCloud. It's sort of there's a loop on there, and there's one thing that's half done. And they say,
it must have been the classic, and it's not mixed down yet.
That's right. Don't worry.
Classic.
It's not mixed down. It's nothing really. It's nothing. But in this case, it actually was nothing. And that's where I was because I wasn't finishing. So just to connect that to what you said about finishing music, then once you have a process that's driving creativity in a way that you can harness regularly, then the next natural outcome is that you start finishing more music, to use a famous phrase. And it comes naturally. I mean, because if you're working at the right speed with the right discipline, you can't keep on going forever with a track. You do need at some point to learn to say stop. And the FMM system is brilliant at that. So from about maybe about a year ago, just over a year ago, I started to finish tracks regularly. And then two or three things happened that for me were important. And one is that you start to share them. And in FMM, you start to share them because that's what we do. But I also have a community of friends and DJs. I share it with them, and they're super supportive and not shy about saying when I wouldn't play this out, mate, but it's a good tune. It's like, okay, thanks. And obviously to family, friends, whatever, but you start to share it. And then two things happen. One is you get feedback, and whether it's, you know, one line, that's a great tune, mate, or it's from FMM, it's much more detailed. And feedback is addictive because feedback is obviously what you learn from. It's a big part of growth, but it's also a social activity. I mean, it's an interchange of thoughts and values and ideas, and, you know, it's so powerful. So as you start to share it and more and become addicted to sharing, then in my case, your perception of yourself changes from I am producing music when I'm not working to one of the things I do in my life is I'm a music producer. And I say that to people now. So what do you do now? I'm doing this, a bit of consulting, business coaching, and I'm a music producer, and I make music on the side. And defining yourself, I mean, I'm a big believer in understanding and cherishing your own identity. And so if the music producer becomes your identity, it's then part of how you interact with everybody else. And when it becomes part of how you interact with everybody else, you're back in that loop of being addicted to sharing because it's part of who you are. You know, it's why people go on social media and express their opinions. Now, I don't think that's such a productive use of time, I have to say, but it's all about this one. So it's this kind of wanting to be heard, wanting to interact. And certainly for me, and any advice I could give to someone who's at an early stage like me is, share more than you think, sooner than you think you should, with people who'll support you, because it will make all the difference in the world.
Totally. And I love what you're sort of saying about the identity, because the other thing with identities is we protect them. So we're so fierce about protecting our identity. And you hear people say, I'm not the kind of person who reads books, even though not reading books is bonkers, in my opinion, anyway, because you've got all the knowledge and the success and people who have achieved amazing things have written it all down for us. But if you say, well, I don't read books, and then that's kind of it. But people will then protect that. And we see people doing it negatively and positively. And of course, you say, well, I'm a music producer. That's what I do. I get in the studio, I do the work, and I ship the work. I get it out there. I share it. I send it to labels and all of those things. Yeah. What was it like when you were sort of first sharing music compared to how it is now?
Well, it was certainly daunting at first and a bit intimidating. I mean, the other side, I'm sure there's people listening to this who'd say, I'm not doing that. I'm not going to share my music. As you said, it's not ready. It's not mixed down. I love that, by the way. And so, yes, you are sharing a piece of yourself, with the world. And so initially it was a little bit intimidating. But that passed very quickly. Because, and I remember distinctly the first feedback I got in the FMM community on the first tune I ever posted was like a watershed. And I think I said in the community that event, by 2 tunes, was almost life-changing, because that's what started this process of changing your perception of who you are. So once you start getting feedback, then you become somewhat addicted to it, and you also know how to ask for it, and specifically what feedback you might want, and also who to go to for what kind of feedback. And the other thing, which is a big part of your philosophy, is you should give as much feedback as you get, whether it's in a community or it's with your fellow producers. Developing those skills, both critical listening, constructive feedback, is also a way of engaging. It's equally intimidating to say, I can't give this person feedback. What do I know?
Who am I to do that?
Who am I to do that? But I sort of, the first time I did it in the Finish More Music community, I decided to find someone long-standing in the community with lots of releases and to give them feedback. I thought, well, why not? And I won't name them, but it's a cherished member of our community who was incredibly supportive and said, welcome to the community. Actually, this is spot on. That's exactly what I need to do with this tune. You're thinking, oh, hello. Maybe I do know something here. And that's all about identity and self-confidence, not arrogance. I think giving feedback keeps us grounded and humble, as does receiving feedback. But it's all part of generating your position in a community and your thoughts on yourself as a producer. So it's huge for me, feedback.
And I think people sell themselves short a little bit as well, in that they're like, well, who am I to do this? But having listened to music, everybody from a young age, because it's what we do as a society, every piece of music you listen to is experience in the right direction. And actually, when you go online, you typically see, if somebody's going to listen and give feedback to a piece of music, they're going to do it on the mix down. And so you're going to get a very short snapshot. And there's a reason for that. Mm-hmm. Number one, it's pretty easy to go, your hat's too loud. Number two, I can play a piece of music for 5 seconds and start talking to you about the mix down. But actually, the real understanding of music and what you were saying, listening for the emotion and trying to capture those things, that's actually a very different type of feedback. And you don't need any experience other than being someone who can listen to music to talk about that. And sure, you can make some suggestions, but most people go, oh yeah, I get that. Now I've got an idea of how I can go and implement that thing. So yeah, that's I think a really sort of fascinating point on the feedback front for sure. Now, in terms of your journey over the year, have there been any mental blocks or just action blocks, things that come up that have been sort of big humps that you've managed to get over?
Yeah, I'm glad you raised it, because I was thinking the same. The last thing I want to do is to paint a picture that's entirely rosy. It's not quite the right word. A picture that's entirely linear. So it's just been growth, 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 growth. You know, amazing.
I'm a legend. Bye.
It's not right. Exactly. It's not like that. You know, you don't get a rocket to the moon by shooting it in a straight line. It can only go in a zigzag, and that's what we do. So yeah, there have been blocks along the way, and one of the things I was going to mention, and you will potentially remember this, is I had a dip after I got some feedback when we did a professional workshop, and the feedback actually wasn't negative. But, you know, if you were thinking linearly, and I think I was thinking every bit of feedback I get is going to be better than the last because I'm growing as a producer, even though I knew that wasn't the case. And the feedback, which was, I'll talk about why it was brilliant in a moment, but seemed initially to be negative. And it was just a matter of taste. It's like, I don't particularly like that, but it doesn't mean it's not a good tune. But it did make me think, oh, there you go. I knew this was going to happen. You know, as soon as the first professional listens to my music and, you know, says, who's this old guy? It's not going to work. But I knew that wasn't the case, but it did knock me back. And the way I got out of it with your support and others was to sort of go back to what I said earlier, which is, you know, this whole process of making music is a personal discovery and a way of having fun and generating a huge amount of satisfaction and joy. Right. So if that's the case, this is another gift. So what are you going to do with it? What are you going to do with this feedback? And so I went back and read it. I talked to the person who gave it, and have done several times since, and realized that what he said actually was follow your instincts and your musicality. And sort of don't slave it, to your point earlier. Don't just copy something else. I didn't think I was copying. That's not really what he meant. What he meant was, as you've now got you've got a set of technical skills, then use that to grow, and trust yourself a bit. To, you know, trust yourself to follow your creative instincts. And it was actually a huge moment, because I was able positively to say, I have made massive progress. Oh no, I haven't. I've hit a wall. No, that's not the case. What you've done is actually got to a point and not quite realized where you were. So you haven't realized you had the technical skills to push on and to really follow your kind of creative, your own creative journey. So it's kind of a tough one to describe. You may be able to help, but that was a block. You know, and it is all about worrying about what other people think, and using external and extrinsic factors to kind of measure yourself. And it's bound to happen as well. I mean, I'm sure you would agree. It's not good. You need to push through it, and you've done some great podcasts on it, but it will happen. You will get in the studio, it doesn't work. You listen to the track, and you think, this is terrible. Or you send it to a DJ mate who says, didn't like it as much as the last one, I wouldn't play this. And you think, oh no, that's it, I've blown it. I'm only ever going to write one great track, and I've already written it, and everything else is downhill. You know, but if you've got the discipline, and you know, you know how to talk to yourself about it, which is what you have to do, then you get through it. So that's definitely that. Like everybody else, I think you have those moments. Imposter syndrome. What are you doing? Spending all your time doing this? You do realize that successful music producers look like this. They're this age. They do this. They're all DJs, and you're not. But it doesn't. I'm glad to say there are. I think I have coping mechanisms and strategies for pushing through it.
I mean, you've mentioned a couple of times now that the age piece.
Mm-hmm.
How has that played on your mind? How has that shown up?
I think very rarely. I'll say that up front. I don't think about it that much, and certainly don't think it. I never have done. certainly don't think I really don't think it's an issue, and certainly to anybody else, who's maybe already had a good career or is, looking back and thinking, I wish I'd started this when I was younger or something. I don't think that's true. So the only time it becomes an issue is if I'm thinking negatively. Then it's very easy. It's like any view of yourself. I used to do a lot of public speaking, and if a speech didn't go well as I'd hoped, I'd say, well, the problem is I'm just really not very good at this, or, I haven't done enough work on it. I haven't trained as a public speaker. And so if I'm feeling negative about music for whatever reason, then I'll beat myself up and say, yeah, and by the way, you should have started this 30 years ago or 20 years ago. You've got no chance. But again, I can push that to one side and say, but that isn't the case. I started when I started. I've decided why I want to do it. I've made my commitment to make this a big part of my life for as long as I like. I'm not setting a goal. I've got to get to here or there, but it's going to be a big part of my life. And everything is looking forward. If you look back and say, I should have started 20 years ago, you could say that about 100 things. I should be a millionaire by now, or I should be able to fly a jet. Well, I can't, so I work with what I've got, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. And it's really funny, the whole age thing anyway, because of the strange numbers that people choose as well. It's when I get to 40, I'm done. 50, I'm done. 60, there's always a zero sitting at the end of this age. And that in itself should be like a red flashing light that this is BS. I mean, this is just insane. I get to this age and then I get switched off, and that's it. I can't go on anymore. And when you look in the industry, you look at your Sasha, John Digweed, we look at Carl Cox, even David Guetta, at risk of having people chucking cabbages at me. But even, all of these different names, they're all in their 50s. I think Carl Cox, I'm not sure whether he's 6, certainly Pete Tong, people like that.
Yeah.
They do it, they love it, and there's no hamper to them going out and smashing it. The one thing that we can definitely say about our industry and our community of music producers is we are not an ageist group in any way, shape or form. And the sky's the limit. And if you wanted to go on and DJ and do all of that stuff, if it became a thing for you, absolutely you could.
Yeah.
And that will come. I mean, at the moment you're brimming with belief, but every milestone you hit opens up yet another door of, oh, I wasn't sure I could do that, and now I think I can. Let's have a go at that,
Yeah, absolutely. And, I also think of the positives, for anyone who is thinking about, is that an issue? I think, well, I've got something, I've got the benefit of, I've been a musician for all of my life, so I've probably written a piece of music, even if it's just improvising some blues or something, every week since I was about 15. So I've got that. I've listened to a ton of music. I mean, a lot of music. I've seen a lot of music performed. I've been to a lot of clubs. I've done, I have all this experience and all of those influences that make you who you are. And I think being a bit older means I don't think I'm a slave to what's fashionable right now. It's more about, I'm going to do the things I want to do. I'm going to use my experience as part of it. And as I said, use the fact that I had some strategies that worked for me in terms of discipline and personal growth when I was in business that I can totally apply. And this, I was telling you in the intro that I got a new studio desk. If I just go off on that tangent, and actually it's a huge thing to realize that my workspace, which was the corner of a basement, didn't feel like going to work. It felt like going to the corner of a basement. Whereas now it feels like this is my workspace. And I can approach this the same way as I would any other activity. It's not about size. I need a big desk or something. This is dedicated. This is organized the way that I want it to be. And it feels like I'm showing up to do some work. In another life, I used to be a racing driver. I mean, I wasn't very good at it though, but I did enjoy it. And my mentor used to say, the minute you put your helmet on, you're at work. He said, you've got to take this seriously, partly because otherwise you'll kill yourself. And the minute you do that, work has started. And he thought, and actually taught me a lot about mindset, because that sort of activity is so intense that if you don't approach it with discipline, then something bad could happen. But anyway, but that's, and I think that, going back to your question, those sorts of experiences, I cherish them now. Those are things that make me who I am. And part of that's a music producer. So I'm totally good with the age thing.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that's it. You have so many advantages over the young whippersnappers. It's exactly how I think as well. What I can achieve in the next however many years is in magnitudes compared to what it was when I was a youngster, for sure. One of the things that you've touched on there that I think is a really cool topic as well is the idea of habits, routines, and environment, because they all play a huge part in creativity. And again, when we talk back to this idea of getting into creative flow, which is where our best ideas typically come through, music almost writing itself, it's effortless, it's in the zone, it's a beautiful place to be. Part of the structure around that is, again, the habits and the routines. We set a pulse and a rhythm for our mind to know when we're going to be writing. It knows the environment. It knows that the things, preferably distraction free. I mean, you have your basement, so you've got a kind of nice space there. Those things are absolutely huge when it comes to creativity. And I remember when I left my job in the city, what I did literally from my first day of no longer being in a corporate life is I still had the alarm and I still got up and I actually went for a walk, the same walk that I would go to work and back round, to keep my body and my mind saying, now it's time to get on. We're not dossing about here. If you're committing and you're being intentional about following a path and a career in music, then you are going to treat that as highly as you would go into work.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree. One of the things, very similar, one of the things that I committed to, I think even before I'd really locked in the music producer journey, when I left corporate life and knew that I was then going to be, my work would be a portfolio of different things, and my wife and I'd have more time to travel, and there's all those good things that come with a change of gears, if you like, that I needed to keep some of the things that had helped me be disciplined, and I'm not saying successful, but disciplined and progressing when I was in business, one of which is to exercise every day, every morning at the same time, which I still do. I still do. Wherever I am, I'll do something, whether it's get in the gym or go for a run or go for a walk or whatever it is, at the same time, because my mind was attuned to the fact that that's how the day starts. And it's not till you've done it that you can start work. And it's also, of course, as is for many people, it's where you organize your thoughts. And it's the difference. And it's particularly true, I think, if you're self-employed. I don't know how far away your desk is from your bed. You don't have to describe it. But if you live and work in the same space and the work is your music or the work is the other work you do, I'm a big believer that you need to create boundaries between them. And I think we talked about it once in FMM Plus. I mean, I do things like I don't use the same coffee cup that when I'm working on my work as a coach or music, or I'm just relaxing, because all of those things, you surround yourself with the same environment and the same habits. If I'm at work, this is what I'm going to do. This is how I approach it. This is how the desk that I'm going to sit at, and even down to the small details, like this is the water bottle that I'll use because I know that I'm working. I think those things really matter. And as you said, your creativity responds so positively to those habits, and it's things like me, it's, and I went back to this, setting your goals the night before. So one of my worst habits as a music producer, I still do it sometimes, is what do you do when you open your DAW first? What is the first thing that you do? and it should be whatever's top of your list, whichever project it is. But Dear Ableton likes to open with a blank project or your own template. And you think, oh, I wonder if I just drop that loop in that I was looking at the other day. I wonder if I can make a track. Or now is the time. I'm just going to drop that plugin in and just play with a couple of the presets. And before you know it, you've blown an hour. None of it was creative. You can set aside time to learn a plugin, obviously. But it's those little things, you know, when you open the computer and switch it on and open your DAW, what's the first thing you do? And for me, it's, you know, whatever my task is, that's what I'm going to do. You know, I'll open it and I will not do anything else. And that's definitely a hangover from business habits, because, you know, your day is highly structured, as you know. You know, you can only work a certain way and be anything like productive. So that's been a big help. But habits, and all of those habits, I think, one of the things I'm not good at, I'm still not good at this, is taking enough breaks and stopping and evaluating. I do tend to let sessions run too long. So I think, you know, and I'm trying to make better use of timers, because it is the case that my productivity falls away after about 30 to 40 minutes and then drops off exponentially. So it goes down a bit and then it just falls off a cliff. And you realize you are just messing around, you know, oh, your ears are muggy or whatever. So that discipline, when to walk away, when to go and get a breath of fresh air is huge.
Yeah, I mean, 40 minutes is about my span with it. I mean, when I used to produce with my buddy Chris Page, he can just go. He can sit almost 8 hours, and that's like, and that was the great thing with that collaboration, was because it's like, all right, I'll do my 40 minutes, then I can go and like get a bit of a recharge, just chilling out for a bit whilst he goes, and then we could swap backwards and forwards. But yeah, totally. For me, I find there's a point where I can't hear the woods for the trees. I know I'm mashing together the wrong saying there, but it nevertheless, that's the kind of thing. Yeah. Okay, cool. I mean, look, this has been awesome. What I would love to kind of close things out with is if you jumped back in time and could give yourself one tip, perhaps. Well, I don't know. Actually, I'll just leave it open-ended. At any point in your life, to do with music, obviously, but if you were to go back and give yourself one solid piece of advice, what would it be?
So I'm going to annoy you by having two pieces of advice.
Oh,
no,
it's amazing. Go for it.
No, well, let's see. I think the most important, that kind of for me connects all the things we've been talking about in terms of discipline and structure and so on, is to put finishing something above how good it is. And it's not just a tune, it's not just finish more music. So going back to our tasks, if my task is to beef up the low end of a track, and I've maybe got 3 things I know how to do, that will do that. What I used to do is keep on beefing it up until I thought it was perfect. And usually, if you compound all the things we've said, it probably wasn't perfect, because I'd done it for an hour. I was adding, you know, sound on top of sound, or plugin on top, or whatever it was. So you never get there because you don't have a definition of perfect. It's not your right to say this is perfect or not. The only thing you can say is I've finished. And the only way you can finish is if you don't let it go beyond a certain time. So a big thing I would have said to myself, as you get on this music production journey, don't mistake perfection for finishing, or finishing for perfection. Get the job done, and then you'll learn something from it, right? And you'll move on. And it took me ages to get that. And this notion that you can't judge whether it's high quality or not, you can only judge whether you finished it, is once you get there, it's great. Then you become addicted to finishing things, and which is a whole nother discussion. And the other one is, I would just remind myself that being a creative is a choice that you've made. No other creative has something you don't. Everybody has the tools if they want to do it, but it is a magical thing to do. You know, to create something that didn't exist yesterday and you did it, is just don't lose your sense of wonder that this is an incredible thing to be doing. And, you know, you're lucky and privileged, and, you know, keep working hard and all that stuff, but don't lose sight of how extraordinary it is to be a creative.
I love that. What a sort of beautiful way to round things out as well. That's really, really nice. So I know we've talked a little bit about sort of what you're doing at the moment, but is there anything that you've got coming up that you want to talk about? I know you've got a bunch of releases on the way and all sorts. Yep. What can we expect?
I think that, so I'm hoping to keep releasing. I've been working on a few tunes as well as all the collabs, some tunes myself that I'm particularly excited about artistically. I'm really enjoying the work. And one of them is the track that we'll close with. So number one goal actually is to keep working, keep on churning out the music and keep on pushing towards all of my artistic goals. Having said that, you know, I think I'll keep working towards the right kinds of releases, and and the sharing that goes with it. And I do have a goal of playing live, which I actually shared with you right at the beginning of FMM Plus. It's just I couldn't do it this year because you can't do it. But I'm absolutely going to do it, and I now share that goal with another FMM Plus member, Andreas Bühler. And we're going to play together. We're going to perform live together at some point in the next year somewhere.
Wonderful.
You know, we're absolutely committed to it.
That's got FMM Meetup written all over it.
Right, the FMM Meetup before the beer starts flowing in my case, otherwise it's all going to fall to bits.
Well, we don't want to get you on too early. We want to get it packed as well, so we'll have to
that's true.
We'll time it. You'll have to sort of let us know your beer drinking capacity and rate, and we'll work it out. We'll calculate the number of hours, this many beers per hours, and when we hit the limit he can't play, so we'll get him in just then.
I can't wait to be out doing something like everybody else.
Yeah, it's going to be absolutely amazing. Well, listen, it's been fantastic. I knew it would be. I always love talking to you, so I knew that you were going to have some really amazing things to share. And I think we've covered so many bases, and you've given so much value, intentionally or not, with your stories. Really insightful stuff. So thank you very much. And I'm definitely going to get you on again next year as well, because your trajectory at the moment is pretty astonishing. You know, you're just hitting goal after goal. And I know you're saying I'm not rigidly sort of boxing myself in, but the skittles are falling really rapidly. And I'm incredibly excited to see where you are in the next 3 months, which is obviously what we do with our goal setting in FMM Plus, but where that goes beyond that, I think is going to be wonderful.
Great. Well, thank you, Keith. It was really fun. It's a real honor.